right, well, good evening, everybody. The content of this presentation is proprietary and confidential information of the Florida Firefighters Safety and Health Collaborative. It is not intended to be distributed by any party without the written consent of the collaborative. Attendees should note that the educational component of this session is being recorded and will be published on the Florida Firefighter Safety and Health Collaborative's YouTube page. To maintain complete confidentiality, an announcement will be made before recordings begin, and only the presenter will be identified during the recording. Therefore, to ensure your privacy, all attendees are asked to mute their microphones until an announcement is made that the recording is complete. Presentations are intended for educational purposes only and do not replace independent professional judgment. The ideas expressed in this presentation are the professional opinion of the presenter and do not necessarily represent those of the collaborative or its constituents. Before acting on any of the information presented, attendees should consider the appropriateness of the information as it pertains to their individual situation and seek independent professional advice should any concerns arise. If you or anyone you know are in what is believed or perceived to be a situation that is or may become harmful, please reach out to the National Suicide Prevention Hotline via phone at 988 or through their website, suicidepreventionhotline.org, or dial 911 in the event of an emergency. I'm so grateful that we have Dr. Gile here this evening. I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and thanks for making time to talk to us about positive marriage strategies.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So here's the basic quick rundown on me. Going on 16 years, my first and only wife, and I'm first and only husband. I only bring that up because when we're talking about marriage, it's just kind of show a good track record here. Currently work as a detective for the Florida Bureau of Fire Arson and Explosives Investigation. I'm serving as our peer support coordinator, which is still a developmental position, and I'm also an agency chaplain. I've been doing law enforcement now for just over 20 years. I have a podcast that I run. It's called Thin Blue Marriage. You can find it on any of the podcast services. It's dedicated to helping law enforcement officers have better marriages. If you're a firefighter or EMS, you can also get a lot of benefit out of it. Just keep in mind, a lot of the examples and references I use are more geared towards law enforcement. And my area of specialty is just first responder marriage support. So that's why we're doing this presentation today. In fact, the basis of my doctoral project had to do with improving the resiliency of law enforcement marriage, which is kind of what was the foundation of the podcast and some other stuff that I've been working on. Okay, so one of the things to understand when it comes to positive marriage strategies, it's going to take probably a lot more to get proficient than what I'm going to be able to cover in this webinar. But I can lay down a foundation and kind of break it down to some bullet points to definitely give you a head start, and a good foundation to build on. But one of the big questions is, why does first responders struggle so much with marriage? Now, obviously, those that have been law enforcement, fire rescue, EMS, it's a pretty stressful job. You got really high commitments to the job because these professions are not just like a regular job. These are a way of life. Your life is dedicated to it. Like I said, there's just a whole lot more to it than, working just a typical 9-to-5 job. But it also has very serious time commitments. How many times has first responder missed birthday parties, missed, weekends, holidays, things like that? That can create quite a strain on marriage, family, and stuff like that. Because your spouse may be okay with you a couple times missing important events, but as years go on, that patience may start to diminish. That willingness to yield for the job could start to diminish over time. You have a very high stress level. Because you're always dealing with things from, people could be dying. You're dealing with the worst moments a lot of people are encountering, and that's going to affect you, whether you like it or not. It's going to have an effect on you. And unfortunately, a lot of that same stress carries over into your home. So you You get off from the job, you're coming home, and maybe you've had a really bad day. And next thing you know, you're snapping at your spouse, you're snapping at your kids, you're having anxiety issues, stuff like that. One of the things with the job is also requires an emotional disconnect. The problem with that is that emotional disconnect that you're using every single day on the job becomes muscle memory. So when you're coming home and you're trying to be in a marriage which has a heavy tie-in with emotion, you're turning that off, whether you realize it or not. So that emotional disconnect that helps you on the job is actually a bad thing when you come home. And of course, the natural jaded and cynical perspective you get towards life and society from being on the job. A lot of times it shows itself whether you realize it or not. There have been times I've been out with my wife and we met somebody new and I'm talking to him or whatever. And my wife was like, "What was that?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" She says, "Well, you look like, he was like you're about to get into a fight with him or something." I was like, "I didn't even realize I was doing that." But it's just one of those things that you just kind of get jaded, you get suspicious of people, you just start to get this negative outlook, which tends to also carry on when you go home to your family. Other things with the job is, of course, we know it fosters machoism and it generally does not support self-care. Now, a good thing is in some fields, we're starting to see that change. Self-care is starting to come out. For example, like this whole organization right here, y'all are focusing on self-care. A lot of agencies are getting peer support programs, especially on the fire side. I don't know about EMS, but I know with law enforcement, we are way behind the curve. I mean, just way behind the curve on self-care. But fortunately, we're starting to move in the right direction. But the culture of first responders promotes unhealthy coping strategies. How many firefighters, police, EMS have developed substance abuse issues, or when they're dealing with stress, they just pack it in. Well, packing in works good short term, but it doesn't work long term. That can start leading to more serious issues. And another thing is, it's a lot of times there's stuff you cannot discuss with your spouse. Now, if you are in a marriage where your spouse is another first responder, you might be able to talk a little bit more about stuff, but there's many things that like I could never tell my wife about just because of the nature of the things that I dealt with. So what we see from this is the combination of these stressors really does create an uphill battle for marital success. The national average for divorce on civilians is around 50%, but that goes up significantly for first responders. We're dealing with a 75% or more divorce rate. And, a lot of first responders, I know, at least in law enforcement, 3 to 5 marriages is not uncommon. I mean, it's just a pretty serious problem, and it's one that can be fixed, which comes the big question. Can it be fixed? Absolutely. Transitioning from a first responder mindset to a good marriage mindset is actually one of those things that's both easy and difficult. On paper, the steps are pretty easy. Unfortunately, making them happen can be a little bit difficult because we have to unlearn a lot of the things that we learn as a first responder, but not even so much. I guess unlearning is not the right word. It's more of learning how to tweak them, how to change them up a little bit. You think about a lot of the tactics that we're learning, great for the job, but not necessarily the best for a marriage, but they can be. So one of the first things is, and this is the most important part, is get that core foundation, which is the proper marriage mindset. This is going to be one of those things that is the most important thing you can do to have a good marriage. Without the proper mindset, you're going to have a very hard time making a marriage work. The biggest challenge you're going to have with that a lot of times just goes into pride. It goes into ego, stuff like that can really be a problem for this. One of the things that we're dealing with here in America, I love my country. I'm very patriotic, but we don't have the best track record when it comes to marriages as compared to a lot of other countries. You've got some of these other cultures that divorce is extremely rare. They're a lot more family focused. We tend to be a lot more career focused, and we let other things affect our marriage. And what we're seeing is that the divorce rates are generally going up, which means the philosophies that we're using that may seem the latest and greatest are really not. Uh, you know, there have been times where, let me give you an example. Whenever I was doing my clinicals, I did them at a hospice facility. We had a lot of patients there, and some of them were on 60 years of marriage, 70 years of marriage. And I would talk to them about what they did, how they managed to stay together, how they managed to keep not only together, but have a happy marriage. And a lot of it just goes down to that proper marriage mindset, which I'm going to get to here in just a sec. So basically, think about it as placing your marriage above everything else. It needs to come first over your job, over family, friends, money, pets, all these different things. And that's one of the problems that a lot of people have. There's a phrase that I've heard many describe before. They call it adultery by proxy. Sorry. Basically, it becomes a situation where the job is the spouse and the spouse becomes the mistress, because they're living for the job 24/7, and they sideline their spouse, they sideline their family because they're focused on their career or something else like that. Sometimes there's times where family have inserted themselves a little too much into the marriage and cause problems. Sometimes it's friends. It could be different things people are fighting over. But the main thing is you've got to place that marriage first. And you have to develop the similar mindset like you get as a first responder, which is failure is not an option. If you're a firefighter, if you're police, if you're EMS, you know that you've got a job to do and you're going to get the job done. That's just what we do. And unfortunately, that mindset of failure is not an option often does not translate to their home life. And so one of the things for this marriage mindset is just that. You have to make it a priority and convince yourself, get that mindset that failure is not an option. So the thing is about this mindset, this is nothing new. If you look at human nature, you can go back thousands of years. You can go back hundreds of years. You can go back to the earliest time of records of mankind. What you're going to find is that human nature does not change. There's a lot of cultures that they have differences, things, technology evolves, things like that. But human nature is the same thousands of years ago as it is today. And what works for marriage today is the same thing that worked thousands of years ago. It's the same tactics. The mistakes people are making now, you can find in history. If you ever start looking at old records, documents, things like that, which I like reading all kinds of stuff from, different ancient cultures just to see how they did things. The issues you're seeing with divorce nowadays, well, you can find them in the past. They had them back in Rome. They had them in a bunch of other different countries. Greece had a lot of these same issues if you really go back and look at stuff. Although I know a lot of people don't ever dig that far into a topic, but that's just the kind of thing I do. But what works today is what worked back then. Think about this way: two become one. Now, since I'm a chaplain, but this isn't a Bible lesson, one of the things in the Bible it talks about, the two become one, comes back from Genesis. If there's ever a way to describe the proper marriage mindset, that is the way to describe it. You're not looking at your spouse as another person. You look at the two of you as one marriage. You have to, when you're doing stuff, you're thinking about your spouse thinks about you. When you make decisions, you're not making decisions as individuals, you're making decisions as a marriage. Now, that concept may seem a little strange, but as a first responder, you're already doing that with your job. If you're a police officer, when you're going in to clear a building, are you just doing it, if another officer shows up, are you just randomly doing your own thing, or are you working as a team? Firefighters, when you're putting out a fire at a building, you've got people on the truck, you got people with the hose. You might have someone cutting holes for ventilation. You're doing all these things as a team. You're working as a group. You're not working as individuals. So if you take that mindset and tweak it to your marriage, it starts making more sense. Think about the team mentality you use as a first responder, but think about it as a team mentality for your marriage. So, what are some of the things you can do to make this work? Some of the little details. Start out by making a commitment both to yourself and your spouse to make the marriage first. So, both of you sit down, look each other in the eye, and sit there and make that commitment that you want this to work no matter what. And if you do that, you've now started in the right direction to make your marriage incredibly strong. Now, it's not going to happen immediately. It takes time, but your commitment is not just words. It's got to be both in thought and action. So when you're thinking about marital stuff, think about it under a team approach. When you're doing actions, you have to, sometimes with commitment, you can't just speak commitment. You have to prove it through actions. Actions always speak louder than words. So that's what you're doing with your marriage. You're going to prove through your own actions that the marriage becomes the priority. The marriage comes first. So depending on where you're at in your marriage, you may be able to quickly convince your spouse that you are truly committed to this. If you're going through a rough marriage or a rough spot, it may take a little bit longer to fully convince your spouse, because proving that you have this commitment, again, takes time. Depending on where you're at in the marriage, it may be easy to make that commitment. Maybe you've already got that commitment in place, or it may just take time. No marriage is the same, and everyone's at different places. Another thing you have to do is forgive and forget for past transgressions. One of the things people like to do when they fight, they like to bring up the past. Oh, well, you're mad about this. Well, I remember the time when you did X, Y, and Z. Well, that's not healthy. That's not going to help you build a team approach, because remember, two as one. So if you think about it from that perspective, by attacking your spouse, you're attacking yourself, because you have to think of yourself as one unit. Now, forgiving and forget can be difficult under certain, conditions. If you've had adultery or affairs, something like that in the past, your spouse or yourself may not be, forgiveness may be a difficult thing. So if there's been other like really serious transgressions that have happened, you may end up having to get counseling as a group just to focus on dealing with that particular element of forgiveness. But one way or another, you've got to be able to overcome that if you really want the marriage to grow. As time goes on, one of the things people talk about is, oh, we used to be in love, but then after a while, it just became stale, or it just got old, or we lost the flame. Well, if you lose a flame, it's because you've allowed it to fade away. So what you got to do is constantly think back to what brought you together. There was something that whenever you met your spouse in the beginning that made you fall in love with them. There was things that went well, things that you did, stuff like that, built that love, that built that relationship enough for you to enter into a marriage. You didn't just go up there. Oh, hopefully you just didn't meet somebody and a week later just get married on a whim. I know sometimes people do that, but I'm sure there was some kind of a relationship, something that happened before that got you to the point that you wanted to marry this person. Remember that, because those elements are still there. It's just a lot of times people forget about them. Life issues come up, you have kids, things like that. So, you just have to be able to come back to those. So, work together to identify both the good and bad influences on your marriage. So this will involve you getting together sometime and actually, laying it out. Get out a pen and paper and start writing this stuff down. what outside sources, what factor, what things are helping your marriage and what's causing stress. But you have to do it from a perspective of team building. Don't use it as a means to start getting into arguments and fights or nothing like that. If you've got stuff that you have to resolve, you may need to, seek counseling or professional counselor to help you mitigate some of those conflicts. But overall, if you're able to look at them from a team perspective, you'll be able to overcome them. So one of the things you want to do is identify each other's triggers. So everyone's got things that are just going to hit that nerve and get you upset, or, if you've been married, you know what they are, because chances are you've been in an argument and you've decided to use those triggers to try to win, because people with egos, that's what they do. They try to win the argument, and they a lot of times do it by just taking digs at each other. And that's what happens with a lot of marriages that end up decaying just because of that right there. They start pushing each other's buttons. So know what they are and just stay clear of them. And that's a two-way street. That's both sides, because everything I'm saying requires both people to work together, because remember, it's a team. Know what your turn-ons are. This is both emotional and physical. There are things about your spouse that you find attractive, and vice versa. Identify what those are, so that those traits you can build on and help bring that romance back into your relationship. Identify the positive and negatives in your life. Specifically, it could be things such as friends, family, faith related issues, things like that. Some are going to be good, some are going to be bad, but at least lay them out so you can see what they are, so you can start focusing on the positive while getting the negative influences out of your life. Now, this is going to be one that can cause a lot of tension, but once you overcome it, it will be a great asset to your marriage. And that is purging the toxic influences out of your marriage and getting close relationships with positive influence. Now, some examples of this that can create issues is sometimes you might have a situation where you might have an in-law. Maybe you've got a friend. Maybe you've got, someone like that keeps inserting themselves somehow into your marriage and creating conflict. As long as that person's there, it's going to keep creating conflict in your marriage. The problem is with this is sometimes it's someone that's very close. Maybe it's a really close friend. It could be family member, whoever. But for that marriage to grow, you've got to be able to get that negative influence out. That doesn't mean you have to cut that person off and, ghost them out of your life. Although in some cases that may be required, but it would involve dealing with that person to the point where you're getting them to not be trying to insert themselves so much into your marriage. Because remember, even though you've got friends, you've got family, if you want your marriage to grow, you got to put your marriage first to become one. Other things, finances have to be handled effectively. Finances create a lot of conflict in a marriage. Some people will say that that's number one cause of divorce. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but it's definitely a big factor. One guy that's name's Dave Ramsey. He's got an approach that program he has. It's Financial Peace University, or Total Money Makeover. It's a great system. I used it years ago, and so I can, personally speak for it that it did wonders in our marriage. It really taught us how to be efficient with money. It took a lot of the money strains away. But the real magic in this program is it also reinforces that team approach to marriage, where finances, you really start working together. It's actually a really great program for building a marriage. Even if your finances are good, it's still a good program to look into. Like I said, I personally used it back when I was doing some detective work. My road partner, we were both, looking into it, and we just bought it on a CD and just played it in the vehicle while we were doing surveillance. And over a couple of days, we went through the whole thing, talked to our wives. Both the wives were on board with it, and both of us agreed it was one of the best things that we did. So something to think about. Make time for each other. In other words, when you're off, be off. One of the mistakes that a lot of first responders make is when they come home, they're still in that work mode. They're still in firefighter mode. They're still in cop mode. They're still in medic mode. Well, you got to be able to turn that off. One, you got to be able to decompress, but you got to make time for your spouse. When you're there with your spouse, be with your spouse. Flip that spouse switch, turn the first responder switch off, turn your spouse switch on. That's very important, because not only does it allow you to focus on your spouse, but it also shows that dedication through action I was talking about earlier to your spouse, that shows through action that you are placing them as the priority, as opposed to making them second to the job. Another thing, find an effective way to decompress from your stress. And you need to have at least two methods: one you can do by yourself and one that you do with your spouse. Because again, you don't want to sideline your spouse because of stress or hobbies, because some people get in this in kind of a trap where they find a hobby or something they can use to decompress, but it's a solo activity. And then what happens is, as time goes on, as their stress goes up, they start spending more and more time dealing with decompression. And unfortunately, they start from that angle sidelining their spouse because they're so busy doing that hobby. And that's not a good thing to do. Let your spouse know that, you're going to need some decompression. But have some things you do with your spouse, some things you do by yourself. One of the things that we do in our marriage that has been really great is, if I'm having a really bad day and I need to decompress, I just call my wife on the way home and say, hey, I'm having one of those days. Give me 30 minutes. And so she knows that when I come in, she doesn't hit me with anything that's be stressful or decision-making or anything until I'm ready to go. And she tells my daughter the same thing, because you know how it is. You come home, family's happy to see you. And sometimes you just need to decompress because maybe you're in an irritable mood and you're afraid of lashing out at the family. So they know that if I come in and I tell them in advance before I get home, I'm having one of those days, they give me a little bit of time. If I need to go walk, I need to go do something to burn off some stress, they're supportive. Now, for the first responders, be careful that you don't do decompression so much that you keep putting things off, that again, you go back to sidelining your spouse or not taking care of stuff you need to at home because you're constantly trying to decompress. If you have that much stress issues, you definitely need to look into some better methods of decompression, because again, that can sneak up on you and create its own set of problems. Let your spouse know what's going on. If your spouse is doing something that they're doing great, tell them. People like to know that they're appreciated. They like to know that they're doing good, or doing well. If they're doing something that's irritating you or causing problems, have a way of talking and communicating with your spouse where you can tell them that what they're doing is bothering you, but not in a confrontational, fighting kind of way, to where it's perceived as a negative. And the next thing you know, you're blowing up on your spouse and getting into a fight because you said something that, that you didn't like what they were doing. Build up that communication where you can do that. And a big part of that is focusing on compliments, not just negative, complaints or something like that. Let your spouse know they're appreciated and that you appreciate what they do. That goes a really long way. Law enforcement, I know of fire departments too, they have shift briefings, roll call, stuff like that to kind of let you know what's going on. Make time for your spouse to do that. Now, I know some of the guys out there are saying, oh, I don't want to just sit around and talk about my feelings, but that's a good thing actually to do with your spouse. Get in there, talk with your spouse, talk to him about what's going on in life, just general chit chat. It doesn't have to be work related. In fact, it's probably better if it's not, but if you need to, sometimes that's fine too. But get in there and open up that regular communications. Think about it in this way. You want your spouse to not only be your lover, but also your best friend. They need to be both. And that is a big part of the this marriage mindset. And once your marriage mindset, and once you make that commitment and you start doing these things, it will become easier and stuff will just naturally start coming together. But also find things that you can do together and make sure they have nothing to do with work. So find some kind of a hobby. You've been together long enough. If there's not something right off the bat that both of you enjoy doing, start looking for something that you can do together. Because remember, also your spouse needs to be your best friend, and best friends do stuff together. So remember that. Make time to do stuff together. If you are in a faith community, then that can be a good help, assuming it's a positive faith community. I may be a chaplain, but I'll be the first to admit that some faith organizations are really good and there's some that are not so good. So if you have a faith community, that can be great, but just make sure it's actually a positive one. So conflict, this is one of the big ones, is when conflict happens. And they're going to happen. No matter how close you are, disagreements are going to happen. The good thing is, as you build your proper marriage mindset, disagreements stop being destructive. Or if they are, they become very minimally. So it'll start having a very small negative effect. What will happen is that often when you start having these conflicts, once you have the team mindset and you start focusing on what the problem is, you'll learn to, instead of attacking each other, you'll start working as a team, the team approach, like you would if you're on fighting a fire or a police call or whatever. You work together to overcome whatever that disagreement is. Now, the thing is with most marital disagreements is it's typically not even an actual disagreement. It's usually more of something based on confusion or misunderstandings. There have been a lot of couples, they get into these arguments and it turns out in the end, they were both in agreement. They just didn't realize it because things were just getting lost in translation. Their communication was bad. Communication is critical, just like as a first responder. You need to know what's going on. You got to talk to your team. You got to talk to dispatch. You got to know stuff. The same thing applies to your spouse. Because if you think you're having a disagreement, the first thing to do is figure out, are you actually having a disagreement? Talk about things that were being said to make sure that it wasn't just the wrong words were being used or something like that. Make sure there's actually a disagreement before you get into a fight over it. And remember, the goal with any conflict is to overcome it. Enemies embrace conflict, teams overcome it. That's what you do with part of the proper marriage mindset, is you're working as a team. You attack problems as a team. And that will help you so much. Now, one thing for first responders is, because we're dealing with all those issues with emotional disconnect, we tend to have all the stress, things like that. When it comes to conflict, we tend, I'll be honest, we tend to be a little more aggressive sometimes in our conflicts. It comes with the job, especially those in law enforcement, because it's just something that you build up on the job. Think about de-escalation tactics. If you can attend any training on de-escalation or anything like that, take it. And especially if it's anything with hands-on, because the same tactics that you're learning to de-escalate stuff on the street or de-escalating with people, the same things will work when you get into an argument with your spouse. But another part of it with learning de-escalation tactics is learning about yourself, learning about your own body mannerisms. What type of message are you transmitting to people with your body posture, your facial expressions, your tone of voice, those words? What de-escalates people on the street? Well, the same de-escalation can work in your marriage, because if you are maintaining body postures that appear aggressive, then your spouse is going to see that aggressiveness. So it'll teach you to learn about yourself, and you can use those same de-escalation stuff to help yourself, so you don't say something to make the problem worse, so that you can get into a position where you and your spouse are now working together to overcome the issue or to figure out the communication gap or whatever it was, without it being, so much hostility. Another thing is you have to overcome the urge to win the fight. That's one of the biggest problems. Ego, ego, ego. People get into fights and they just want to win. So all they're doing is focusing on winning the fight. Someone says something, you're going to give it back to them, and you're going to win. Well, the reality is, in a marriage, the more you try to win, the more you're really just losing, because the more you're taking jabs and the more you're sitting there fighting your spouse, the more you're just hurting your marriage. Remember, 2 and 1, 2 become 1. Think about it from the team approach. You're just hurting the team by fighting the team. Screaming, name calling, insults, abusive behavior. Again, these things only make the problem worse. So even though if someone hits that trigger, just you sometimes you just got to sit there, take, breathe for a minute, pause, and then, keep yourself from saying those really, nasty things to each other. And just because the other person does it, don't sit there and fuel the flames by going back and forth. If one person screws up, don't sit there and, like I said, make it worse. Remember, the deeper the cut, the longer it takes to heal. So the more vicious you get into your fight, the longer it's going to take for you to recover. And the good thing about it is, once you really start getting good at conflict resolution between you and your spouse, you start learning how to work as a team. You'll be surprised how many times something that should be a conflict or some kind of problem comes up, it can actually make you stronger, because immediately you'll start going right into this team mentality on trying to deal with the issue. Now, something that you really got to be aware of, especially the first responders, if your spouse starts noticing that your anxiety is starting to creep up, your aggression is starting to come up, you're starting to have more problems, that could be an early sign of PTSD. That's something that, I spent a lot of time studying wellness, and it creeped up on me. I got diagnosed with PTSD, and a lot of the stuff that was happening was I was building up all this. My anxiety was going up, my temper was getting faster, all these things were coming up, and I didn't even realize it. I started making excuses in my head of other reasons why things were going on. And until one day it finally spilled over. But, check with your spouse, because you may not see the changes in yourself, but your spouse will. So, and it just kind of keep that in mind. So if that starts happening a lot and your spouse starts seeing that change of behavior, you might want to start looking at, again, PTSD issues or something like that could start creeping in, because there have been a lot of people who their marriage was fine until PTSD came in, but it wasn't diagnosed. They didn't realize what it was, and it was mistaken for just an unhappy marriage, and it ripped a marriage apart. So don't let your marriage get ripped apart because of a job-related trauma. Little issues can become big ones if you ignore them. So if a problem comes up, don't just take the whole yes, dear approach on every little thing, because if there's a problem exists and it doesn't go away, it's like a cavity. You can ignore a cavity all you want, but if you sit there long enough, it's going to grow and lead to a root canal. So if an issue comes up, it's much easier to take care of it when it's small than to just keep, just dismissing it, because again, over time, it will get worse. And then sometimes if it's really bad, you may just have to get counseling. Don't be afraid to get counseling. Remember, marriage is your priority. A lot of people don't want to do counseling because of pride, ego, shame, whatever it may be. If counseling is what you need to make your marriage work, then do that. Your marriage needs to be the priority, even over your ego. Okay, some things to remember. First responders can have happy marriages. It is possible, despite the 75% divorce rates. The stuff that I've been talking about on here, it's been validated. Okay, I've talked to people who, were hospice patients that had been married for 60, 70 years. This is the same stuff they did. I used it in my marriage. It works. It works amazingly well. I know other officers who have also had the same approach. It has worked for them. So the method works. It's just a matter of getting yourself to where you can do it, because changing your mindset, getting that commitment, that first initial mindset will be the most difficult thing, because it's, for a lot of people, it goes against what you're used to doing. It's not a traditional way of looking at marriage, but once you get there, you're going to start quickly seeing that your marriage will start getting better. But remember, it does take time. If you've got a rocky marriage, it's not going to be fixed overnight. It could take months. It could take a year. But the more commitment that you and your spouse have, the faster it will go. But sometimes you just may have things that just take time to overcome. If there's a trust issue involved, if there's some forgiveness issues, if there's some kind of trauma, if there's some family issues that you may have to overcome, it may take time. But the main thing is by showing that commitment through action, you're really helping the process. You can't just make this marriage work by wanting it to work. It takes action and it takes commitment. But the biggest thing is, do not give up. Once you give up, it's going to fall apart. If you start doing this, months go by, you're not seeing much progress, that could happen if you're in a spot where your marriage is really bad. But don't give up. You will make progress. And as you start getting past those hurdles, you're going to find it speeds up. So it's going to start slow, but it snowballs. So the more you go, the faster it's going to start recovering. But it's just one of those things that, depending on where you're at, some mountains are small, some mountains are big, but you get to the top by taking one step in front of the other. Take care of your mind, body, and spirit. The three are interconnected. If you start neglecting them, it can start bringing other stress, other issues into your life that can spill onto your marriage. So with that being said, that's kind of the quick rundown. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or anything like that?
I always have questions, but I'll give the floor to everybody.
All right, go ahead.
I do that. All right, so I'll break the ice then. Okay.
All right.
So I was married to someone with PTSD, and you were touching on some first life stuff there, talking about you need to be willing to get help, and if not, it can really affect you as a person and your family around you. That's what led to our divorce. That said, I know that in that process, and even in the process, because my better half, I'm a first responder, but so is my better half now. And he, I found that in relationships, like, you tend to take on different traits of your spouse, right? So you were talking about looking at, the community as a whole, and looking at different things. And we have lots of first responder spouses in here as well. And I don't know if anyone wants to come forward or whatever. I don't know if anyone else in here felt that, or if you have any recommendations on, like, as a team, how you kind of approach some of those negative outlooks, and or how a spouse can approach a first responder in saying, like, I've noticed some things. And so it's a healthy conversation instead of an accusatory conversation.
Yeah. And that's one of those things that it is an issue. First responders tend to have that very negative outlook, and they can be a downer sometimes. What we do in our marriage is, my wife, she knows when I start getting that spot, she just has to give me a positive reinforcement. She starts picking out things that are good. There are good stuff. And sometimes she insists on me actually identifying some of the good things. Like, tell me something good about that. The good thing about that is not just me hearing it, it now forces me to now switch into a positive mode.
Gratitudes are, we don't know each other very well, but
yeah,
a couple of people here that do know me, gratitudes are my jam. And so my, well, my, that's my best friend, but my girly best friend, friend is here too.
Yeah.
And she and I will have a bad day, and we've kind of learned with each other to say, okay, but what are you grateful for? And
Mhm.
to reframe what you're looking at. And I love that. It's amazing.
Yeah.
um, do you have any recommendations on? I have one other question after this.
Sure. Good.
Any recommendations on presence exercises that you can give to the group?
Presence exercise. You talking about as far as spending time together and stuff like that,
You
or?
had made mention in your discussion of being present and not being thinking about work. And
Oh, yeah.
so when you talk
Gotcha.
about, volunteer firefighters, for
Mhm.
example, which is the predominant part of this country,
Mhm.
and you're carrying a radio around everywhere you
Yeah.
go. So just if you could talk about maybe some presence exercises or something like that to help people be in the moment and not
Mhm.
constantly have their attention in 10, different ways.
Yeah, there's different ways of doing it. What works for us, and it's kind of a blunt issue. So she'll just remind me, hey, you're talking about work. Oh, okay. And that's enough for me to switch it. But some of the things to do is, you got to find that hobby. You got to find something that you can do, even if it's just watching TV, something that you can do that just does not involve work. And you kind of just set those parameters of, okay, when we're together, we don't talk about work, and you just make that rule, and you just have that with the team approach, that if you start talking about it, your spouse reminds you of it, but in a positive way. Just reminds, hey, you're starting to cross over there. And then you, the first responder, have to remember, with turn your ego off to say, okay, I'm crossing over. Don't take it as a personal attack, but a reminder of, we're trying to make things work here. And it's just a friendly reminder. And as long as you can turn the egos off and people don't get offended by it, it works great. It's actually a really good system. But the main thing is, have something that has nothing to do with the job.
My follow-up question to that is, how did you and your spouse like create your communication plan? Like, how did you get to the place where you identified together that you're going to say, hey, I need 30 minutes when I get home, because I feel like that's a hard barrier for first responders
Mhm.
to break, in creating that and respecting it on top of it. And
Mhm.
so I'm wondering how you and your spouse got to that place to create a communication plan.
Well, if you try to tackle it before you get that marriage mindset of the whole commitment thing, it can be a bit difficult. But once you get down and you make that commitment, we're going to make it work, you bring it in, you address it from that perspective. So after you make that commitment, we're going to make this work, then you sit down and you start opening up that general dialogue. So once we were both in that frame of mind, it became a whole lot. It was actually fairly easy to do once we adopted that marriage mindset, that we're going to make it work, and we're each going to have to make some kind of little changes, tweaks in our life if we want this to work. And so once you lower that, then it becomes pretty easy, because then we would just sit down, and I don't want to describe it as like a staff meeting, but that's kind of the way it was. We just sat down and started laying out, okay, we got this, and this. How can we overcome it? And then we just sat down. She gave her point of view. I gave my point of view. We started discussing things. And the first time, couple times you do it, it is awkward. It's something you're not used to, because you're worried about your spouse. How are they going to react? Are they going to get upset? Are you going to hit that trigger switch, or whatever's going to happen? But once you do it the first couple times, and you're successful, no one blows up, no one gets offended, no one gets butthurt. It works great, because then it makes it easier for you to just sit down and say, hey, I need to talk about something real quick. And we're to the point now that's exactly it. And the good thing about it is because we have that stuff, when I did get diagnosed with PTSD, which really wasn't that long ago, I'm still in the recovery phase. She has been the best asset I have had through this whole process. She's been there by me. She's been supportive. Um, and if we had a rocky marriage, it could have easily been perceived as, I just turned into a jerk, and now, I'm just yelling at her all the time. So, that marriage mindset, man, once you get that team mindset there, the rest of it actually becomes pretty easy and it will become very natural. It's just that initial barrier, getting that first jump start is going to be the challenge.
I had to laugh because you brought up the staff meeting, and that's like my husband and I actually, we tell the kids we're going on a staff meeting, like, don't bother us, leave us alone, don't text us unless there's blood, vomit, or fire, like, leave us alone.
Yeah.
And we'll go out to a bar, and sometimes we'll talk and sometimes we won't, and we'll just kind of sit and like turn our phones over so we're not interrupted, and just like sort of download like what's been going on for the last few days. And if we do that at home, we get interrupted, whether it's from our kids or from like that task that has to be done that will just take a minute, which it never does. There's always some sort of like hardware store emergency or whatever. There's always like something to get in the way. But if we go, I don't care if we watch like a football game or a hockey game or whatever, we can just sit and just be like, hey, this happened. And this organic conversation can still come out that just sort of like, just we can sort things out that way, and it helps us both kind of decompress in a way that we wouldn't if we were sitting in our house looking at stuff that needs to get done.
Yeah.
I've been married 15 years this year. My husband is brand new retired. He's not here. He's already traveling. But I was married before, and so it was really easy to at least figure out in my second life what I did not want to emulate from my first life. And that's a hard no. And I mean, that's as far as I'll go about talking about my first life. But, I'm just very lucky and very grateful to be in the position that I'm in now, where, I mean, he is my teammate, but in the same sense, like, if you can't make fun of your teammate, what are you going to do? We bust balls all the time, and it's kind of what gets us through the day some days, as long as it's, that fine line of what you're not supposed to make fun of, which I always cross. I'm terrible at it. But, I am, Michelle, I am, I'm in trouble because, shouldn't have said that, it happens, like it happens. But I just had to point out, honestly, like, that staff meeting is like the best thing that happened to our marriage, is like a discernible, like, don't bother me time. And seriously, it's like blood, fire, or vomit. And two of those three, they can handle themselves. So it just worked out for us.
Yeah, it's a great way just to get past stuff instead of trying to be subtle or do hints or things like that, where confusion can happen. Things can get lost in translation. Especially guys aren't always the best at subtleties. You sit down, you lay everything out. And once you got that right mindset, it becomes easy just to sit there. Like you're saying, you can just sit there organically, talk about it, get it all worked out. So
no one would call me subtle that's known me more than 30 seconds, dude. 100%. That's not my strength.
No, but I love you. I wanted to say some resources that I had thrown in the chat. And early on, you had talked about like getting through things, and even infidelity being one of them. And there's this amazing TED talk by it's Esther Perel.
Okay.
And it's called Rethinking Infidelity, and how you can actually rebuild after infidelity in a relationship to actually be an even stronger unit together. So I threw that in there. And then something that I can certainly vouch for, like you were talking about connecting, right? So there's this awesome book called Adventure Dates. And because like date nights, as you get on in a relationship, they get boring, right? You end up like going to dinner and talking about your day or the kids. And so this Adventure Dates book, you scratch off, whatever you want to do. And you plan a different kind of date night. So it keeps things like, like fresh and new, And then
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. They also came out with, and I will totally vouch for it on the recording, they also came out with adventure dates in the bedroom to keep things spicy also, right? And so that it doesn't get boring, like you said, right? That there's romance and there's intimacy and there's learning each other on a different level than just, what you've maybe known someone for so many years. Then I put in there redlinerescue.org, which is where anybody can find culturally competent clinicians. And it's growing. It's obviously in Florida, but it's growing throughout the state, clinicians and peer supporters. And as someone who went through couples therapy with my ex-husband who lived with PTSD, and then therapy on my own, like I I love my therapist. She knows this, and I profess my love to her all the time. Like, she got me through some real shit, right? So
Mhm.
I highly recommend it. And no one ever has to know about it if you go to that website. And then our website, the collaborative website, and Second Alarms as well. That's Dr. Kelly O'Dara on the call tonight. Always willing to help and have resources, classes for police or fire, right? Peer support, like just trying to build a better, more mental health focused first responders out there. So just to kind of back up some of the things that you were saying, there's stuff out there that you don't need to invent the wheel. Like it's
Yeah.
already built for you. So I recommend it.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll check some of them out. So,
If there are
any
no
other
more
questions?
now, I'll stop the recording if there are no other questions, so we can, anyone that wants to ask questions not on the recording, we can do that as well. All right, then I'm going to stop the recording. I just want to thank you one more time for your time and attention this evening, Dr. Gile. Amazing information. Next month we'll be back, our last one of the year. And then next year we'll start anew. So thank you to everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next month.